This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. I'm Richard Fields. On the show today, John Cameron, regular and friend of the show, and Arvin Vohra, the former VP of the Libertarian National Committee. Did I get that right, Arvin?
Yep. Yeah, and thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, welcome to the show. The first topic on our list today is the regulation of cryptocurrency. I don't know if anybody besides me has been following cryptos in this room with a passing interest, but I think it's really interesting how the regulatory agencies, the CTFC, Commodities Trading, whatever it is, Corporation, the SEC, the international regulators, even state regulators want to get on the action of telling crypto buyers and sellers and traders and lenders what they can do. What do you think about all of that?
Here's one really core thing about this whole thing, which is that the whole point of crypto was to get outside of the regulatory stream. And that was done not by asking permission, but by creating something that was technologically superior, technologically, mathematically superior to what they had. And that's in the DNA of cryptocurrency. So they're going to keep on finding better and better ways to keep the regulators out. And it's going to be an arms race, in my view, that the government's simply going to lose.
Interesting that you are predicting the winner. I would hope that you're right. What I find is interesting is the reason, or one of the main reasons that the whole crypto project was started, particularly starting out with Bitcoin, was because the Federal Reserve and the monetary authorities worldwide have been doing a really good job of inflating currency, making currency worthless, their goal is 2% inflation, which means that in something like 30 years, you lose half the value of your money. And they're doing it by something called financial repression, which means that they are depressing interest rates to the zero bound or negative in real terms, so that people who save as opposed to speculate don't get any return on their investment, which means the middle class and the less than middle class are essentially frozen out of making any money by being thrifty. And crypto turns that around, particularly the DeFi applications, which allow cryptocurrencies to be lent out without an intermediary, without banks being involved, being lent out at 5, 10 or more % interest rate, which you can't get in the traditional finance system.
One of the things that I find real interesting about the articles about the negativity of cryptocurrency is citing one. They constantly cite one case where somebody managed to interfere with a transaction and basically defrauded somebody out of a few $1 million. And I seem to remember the state of California being defrauded out of about $200 billion just in its unemployment, and numerous stock exchanges listed companies and hedge funds that were basically Ponzi schemes. So these are all hyper-regulated markets with lots of government oversight and all the rest of that. And fraud has become so common in them that doesn't even make the financial pages, much less the front page of the newspaper. But the excuse that the regulators are using to create a need for their oversight of the financial world is minuscule amounts of fraud in something they don't really understand. So it's the typical government response: ignore all the calamities that have been caused by their quote-unquote regulation and oversight, and point out a tiny flaw in something that allows people some freedom. And that's the thing I find very interesting in it.
And I think that the rationale...
I mean, this isn't about keeping investors safe. This is about making sure that politically connected banks that keep funding campaigns are the ones that make the profits, right? I mean, that's the reason that they care. If Ethereum was donating a bunch to campaigns, they would probably like Ethereum just fine too.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, that's the point I didn't make in it. Thank you, Arvin, for pointing that out.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
exactly the point I was about to make, which is this is not about protecting the little guy or protecting investors or savers or anybody else. It's about protecting the vested interests of central banking and central bank clients, namely the banking system worldwide, and the companies and the politicians that benefit most directly from it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the typical shell game. Let's make people afraid so that we can control the marketplace, hand out favors to the people who are bribing their way into influence and keeping the rest of the world out. Yeah.
Which brings me to the next topic, also based on fear. Lockdowns are raising their ugly head once again. In Sydney, people are being fined hundreds of thousands of dollars for being outside and being called, and I quote, filthy, risky behavior, participating in filthy, risky behavior, simply by being outside. And, all of the science, if you want to quote science, shows that being outside is a heck of a lot safer in a pandemic era than being locked up inside. So we have, the control freaks using an outbreak of, I guess it's the Delta variant or something, to reassert their ability to control people by locking down the economy. And it's not just Australia. Los Angeles is requiring masks again. There are protests not only in Sydney, but also in France, in Italy, and elsewhere. When will this end?
When will this end? It's going to end way after it should have ended, and when the powers that be can't milk it any further to sink their hooks and talons and their trotters in the trough. I mean, it's all about, the whole thing's all been about political power and control and growth of government, and it was obvious from the beginning that this. Well, it's what's really obvious is we're never going to get real numbers on this thing, mm-hmm. because all of the organizations are tracking, maybe they're tracking internally people who've died with COVID, but they don't segregate out people who've died of COVID. So we have no idea how dangerous this thing really is. And anybody that tries to get a peer-reviewed paper out there that maybe takes away from the fear, can't get it published, and they're called liars and thieves, and then a little further in the paragraph they're connected with Trump, so half the people won't read what they say anyway. And so it's the same old game. And when will it end? Years after it could have, and if they can find out something else equally scary to throw in there to create more power for government and less power for people, that'll replace it. So, what the heck?
I mean, a lot of people have wondered why so many of us have been skeptical of the information we've been getting from the media, because they're like, the media is saying all this information. Why would they lie about this? But those of us who have been, studying medical politics for a long time have probably noticed that the media at no point during the pandemic covered the reasons why there might be hospital shortages. Specifically, that the government restricts the numbers of hospitals by requiring hospitals to have certificates of need signed by their competitors, which is why today at an emergency room, the wait is much longer than if you're, in line on a Friday night to get a chicken fajita or something like that. I mean, that's the backwards result you get from government involvement. And the media never talked about it. It's been, a year now, more than a year now, and the media has never talked about this fundamental thing that we all know about. So if they haven't talked about what we know, why would we believe them when they're dealing with uncertainties? They've shown themselves to be liars again and again and again, and they can't be trusted. I don't know if they're telling the truth this time, but after you cry wolf 50 or 60 times, people will stop trusting you.
And I think to answer my question, when will the lockdown stop? They'll stop when a majority of people, or even a large minority of people, say, to hell with you guys. We're not going to listen to your nonsense anymore. when they will, the lockdowns will stop when people simply say, "I've had enough. I'm not going to take it anymore," and disobey.
Well, and then I think, yeah, add to that you're seeing backlash. People who've, we think that people are stupid, and a lot of them are, but the people are looking at what's going around, and enough information is out that has shown that the lockdowns basically don't improve public health. They're contrary to 100 years of scientific public health that has dealt with other issues. That what the people supposedly in charge and knowledgeable have said has changed. Their messaging has changed radically. Masks are useless, don't use them. Oh yeah, we knew all along masks work, but we wanted to make sure that people in healthcare had them. So for you hundreds of thousands of people who died, if masks worked at all, we were lying to you. And then this Delta variant, that all the language is filled with if and may and could and might. Kind of reminds me of global warming a little bit.
We're not going to go there quite yet. That might be the next scare thing. One thing that libertarians have been united on since the founding back in the early 70s is that the drug war is bad. It's counterproductive in numerous different ways. We're seeing marijuana being legalized and the legalization being supported now by 60, 70, 80% of the public, depending on who's doing the counting. And interestingly now, psychedelics, LSD, and all of the rest of the really bad Schedule I drugs are now being posited as being treatments for PTSD, depression, bipolar disorder, chronic pain, and the addiction that comes from being chronic pain being treated by opiates and other less effective ways. And the interesting thing is billion-dollar companies, some including one backed by Peter Thiel, are now being used to, are now being floated to take advantage of the new market in psychedelics as medicine. Any thoughts on that?
I think the core of this is scientifically, we know there is no such thing as a medicine with zero side effects. And so when people point out that some of the currently illegal drugs have bad side effects, yeah, no kidding, of course they do. All drugs have side effects. But the fact is, now that we're allowing people to actually start to think about these things openly, and now that you have a little bit more political and openness and financial backing, you're seeing that people are willing to calculate their own risk, and even better, that medical professionals are willing to figure out what the appropriate risk and what the appropriate method is for everybody. Listen, nobody's saying that every person in the world who ever has a bad day needs to immediately take LSD, but that when you're working with an expert who's weighed all the different possible treatments, this is one more piece in their arsenal in this in their work to try to actually treat some of the most difficult, most recalcitrant issues in mental health. So I think it's a great thing.
I think you mentioned something, Arvin, about nothing being without side effects. I look at a drug that was illegal in this country during Prohibition, and then Prohibition was taken away and became legal. And we know that something that's consumed by literally millions of people on a regular basis results in cirrhosis of the liver and all sorts of other things. Probably half the traffic fatalities are due to impaired people driving impaired by alcohol. Yet it's perfectly legal. You can go to a store to buy it. You have to present an ID though, which is that's suppression, if you ask me. And because it's part of the entrenched power curve and people that run these multi-billion-dollar companies that provide this drug pay a lot of money to keep people in political power. Something with proven harmful side effects is completely legal, where other things that have been basically proven, like marijuana, to have virtually no harmful side effects and be effective treatment for chronic pain and all the rest of that are still, Schedule 1 drugs. So, it's again about power. And, it's just like heroin and morphine and all the rest of them. They used to think that these drugs were horribly addictive. And then after Vietnam, something like over 20% of U.S. troops in Vietnam were using heroin. So based upon their experience, they expected to have 90% of those be heroin addicts when they came back to the United States. Turns out that 4% of them were, because once they were out of an environment where everybody used heroin, they stopped doing it. So, I mean, the misinformation and disinformation that's out there about any kind of drug is just crazy. And I love to see, as Richard pointed out, other tools in the toolbox, because they're even if there's 100 people who have severe PTSD that nothing else works for in a carefully controlled therapeutic environment where they use a psychedelic to rewire their brain and take away the wiring that caused one event in their past to completely control their life going forward. Even if 100 people benefit, it's worth legalizing and selling.
Looking down my notes,
sorry, I just want to emphasize one thing that John said, which is the entrenched powers. It is important to remember that the alcohol lobby has historically been one of the biggest supporters of the war on drugs, because it is a war on their competition.
War on competition, just like you talked about with the medical industry. Whenever I get in discussion with people, and it's frequently with people who work in hospitals or in the medical field, I always say, it would really help is if you guys had some competition, like if there was not just the AMA, but the AHA, and they could license people to heal. And they look at me literally like I just crawled out from underneath a rock. And I've had people say, you're dangerous. You shouldn't be allowed to speak about this stuff. I've had people tell me that in meetings. And I say, good. We need some dangerous thought here to get rid of this medical monopoly. I mean, in this country, we have the most expensive health care in the world. And if you drill down and look at it, there's a lot of third-party payer costs and everything else. One of the major reasons is that everybody who works in the industry is, quite frankly, grossly overpaid. You look at an equivalent job in any other industry, and they're not paid that much. And why are they paid that much? Because you have to join their union, and their union controls everything. So, competition. Yeah.
Looking down my notes, I think I have found the next scare tactic that we can use, or that the powers that be can use once people get tired of lockdowns and masks. And that is, there is now a deadly, untreatable fungus. Will that be the next pandemic?
Untreatable fungus. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, there's
deadly fungus.
There's been
it's a form of candida or something like that. Anyway, it's supposed to be deadly. I don't know anything about it, but just now starting to make the headlines.
Yeah. And what, 20 people have had it, or 40 people, or 50 people in the U.S., and it's the next coming thing. Well, Richard and I both worked in publishing for years and years and years, and there's a saying: if it bleeds, it leads. And newspapers, websites, all the rest of those people, you're not going to wake up and turn on the morning news and see, here's some things to be happy about today. What you're going to see is fear. And fear drives intervention on the part of the government. And I always think that aliens would be the best thing for the government to latch on to, because you can't disprove it. And what the heck? But I think
looked into it a little bit.
Latch on to something fungus. Fungus is,
I mean, funguses generally don't have the same rate of growth as that same exponential rate of spread that viruses can. But you never know. There was many of the things that have become political issues today, big divisive major political issues, largely spurred on by a left-wing media. 10 years ago, if someone said that's going to be an issue, I'd have said there's no possible way. It's just too ridiculous. But I was wrong. So, I mean, who knows what they have in plan for us, in store for us next.
Yeah, we just continue being politically incorrect. And speaking of the originally politically incorrect comedian, Jackie Mason passed away. Jackie Mason made his start being politically incorrect when he started giving the finger, showing his middle finger when on the Ed Sullivan show, when Ed Sullivan was on the sidelines telling him to hurry up, waving his finger at him. We want to make way for an LBJ press conference of all things. We have to, you have to get off the stage earlier than originally scheduled. Jackie was having none of it, so he started waving his finger around, except it was a different finger. They eventually, they sued each other and, were in each other's face, Jackie and Ed. But eventually they made up, and Jackie Mason went on to have just a stupendous career making everybody laugh.
Well, I think that when you read his history, he started out as a rabbi from a family of rabbis, generations of rabbis. And he noticed something that people who weren't Jewish were attending his, they don't call them sermons in the Jewish faith, I don't know what they call them, but whatever. They were attending these events that he was speaking at because he used so much humor. And humor, if you can get somebody to laugh at the punchline, it means one thing, and that's that people are listening. They're smart enough to get the punchline, but primarily it means they're listening. And humor is a wonderful tool for anybody that has to speak, teach, or convince. And he was, a master of the communication medium. And, they started out talking about him being too Jewish. And what's his favorite? One of his lines is, that's like saying a bear's got too much fur. It's his humor was funny to everybody, self-deprecating. He was smart as a whip. And a lot of people patterned themselves after him. It wasn't quite as ethnic, but he broke a lot of boundaries, and his passing, we're going to miss him. Yeah.
And it really shows just how far humor has gone backwards over the last couple of years. Where I do believe that if Jackie Mason was alive today, if he was in, say, a new comic, right? He wasn't like an established legend of the craft, but he was a new comic today, I can nearly guarantee he would have been canceled. He would have been targeted by people who don't want people to enjoy life or laugh or do anything that involves thinking outside of the narrow zones of thought that they've approved of. So I think it's sad that he's gone. His life was just magnificent, but I think that it really lets us know just how powerful humor can be. And honestly, it lets us know why those who are on the restrictive left fear humor so much. We've seen this, one of the most interesting examples of the fear of humor was just a couple of years ago. There was folks who were sharing, dark humor memes on a private, hidden, secret Facebook channel, and they had just gotten into Harvard. Harvard found out they were telling jokes and rescinded their admissions letters from Harvard. That's the extent to which the left fears humor, which lets me know that humor is the exact right thing for all of us to be doing right now.
I wish I could tell a joke about that, but I'm coming up short. Let's talk about. Go ahead, John.
Humor has always been politically incorrect. I mean, humor, when you look at it, just about any joke is associated with some kind of pain, and it's finding humor in that pain. It's finding some joy and just basically finding humor in things that bog us down in life. And that's what comedians do. And they allow us to laugh at ourselves and see the silliness of things that we get so serious about. And that's a wonderful thing. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is life's way too important to take seriously. And good comedians are worth their weight in gold. So, anyway.
Of course, libertarians are perennially the the politically incorrect party, looking in, trying to make some headway against Republicans and Democrats. You've had some experience with looking in the window from the outside, Arvin. Some changes have been made at the Libertarian National Committee. We have a new executive director in Tyler Harris, a new chair of the LNC in Whitney Ballou. What are your thoughts on the changes that are happening internally within the LP, and do you think they're negative, positive, for the good, or not?
I don't know Tyler well, but I served with Whitney on the LNC for a very long time, for several years. And she's somebody that just has a lot of integrity, just a ton of integrity. She considers things carefully. She stands for principle. She's not one of those people that just gets kind of blown about by the political winds. Like, she will stand, and we've often stood against each other. I mean, we haven't always been on the same side by any means. But I think she's somebody who I have a lot of respect for, and I think would be a great leader for the Libertarian Party, for the Libertarian National Committee. I mean, I could, if she runs for re-election, I could certainly see myself voting for her. I mean, I think that she's certainly a great choice. I also think that we're seeing a lot of internal struggle within the Libertarian Party between those who want to change culture and those who are terrified that culture might change. And I think it's a very old battle that's been going on. Sometimes, people who are more kind of right-leaning want to change culture. Sometimes people who are more left-leaning want to change culture. But there's always been a core that has always been afraid that we might actually win. And we have made huge cultural changes. We were part of the driving force that overturned the marijuana laws. We are right now part of the driving force that's changing so many other parts of culture. And I think that Whitney is somebody who will embrace or at least I hope that she is, and I also do think that she is, something that's going to embrace our ability to change culture and thereby change politics.
Yeah, I've always said that the value of the Libertarian Party is not so much in whether or not we win or lose electoral offices, although, of course, we very much intend to win electoral offices. It's in how much we can change the dialogue culturally and so on among Democrats and Republicans, to the extent that we can get a Ron Paul or a Rand Paul or a Massey or an Amash within the Republican Party, or somebody within the Democratic Party, to embrace our core positions and run with them, and do so honestly and sincerely. Hey, we've won, and that's happened not only with the drug laws, marijuana in particular, but also with same-sex marriage, with now the psychedelic legalization movement. We're making headways on what you mentioned earlier, the anti-competitive laws, where people have to get permission from their competitors in order to enter a trade or to build a hospital or to become even a tradesman. You have to get the permission of other cab drivers in order to become a cab driver, and that's why Uber and Lyft have had so many legal difficulties. So I think that the way libertarians make a difference is at the margin in changing the political dialogue.
Well, that's always the way it was in this country, is a third party would come along and rather than become a majority party, whatever worked, whatever made sense that it represented, became part of the platform and then of another party. And I'm glad. And
that's all we have time for, John. Thanks for wrapping it up. We'll see you again next week on the Libertarian Counterpoint. Thank you, Arvin. Thank you, John, for being part of the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Richard. Appreciate it.
Good.
Was my timing right?